Tom's still, yeah. All right, good evening to everyone. Call the May 20th, 2019 City of Mount Vernon Council meeting to order. We do have a couple changes to the agenda that we have in front of us. We will be tabling the ordinances, both F1 and F2 tonight. Chris has some work that he would like to do before we bring those back to the council. And then also item J4, which is just waiting on some additional paperwork for that change order as well. So with all that said, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with those 3 items tabled.
I second.
You have to make an individual motion when you get to each of those, but.
So we're approving the agenda with those changes, but then at each point we'll have
At
to
each
move
point,
to
you will have to
table.
move to table
Okay,
each one
gotcha.
of those
Okay.
items.
This is just an amendment.
So Tom, look,
Yeah, just.
we got a second?
Yeah, I seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Communications, is there anybody that would like to address the council? If so, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Matt Siders. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Mount Vernon. And I'd like to introduce to you Jake Stannerson. Jake is an Eagle Scout here in Mount Vernon, and he did the pergola project in the dog park to the shade shelter. And Jake did a tireless job of keeping me informed of the progress of the project and updates on how much it was going to cost and how many people are going to help him. So an outstanding job. If you haven't seen it yet, he's got some pictures here. So if he may approach.
Yep.
Oh man, we're one short. So when do you guys have to share this?
The mayor doesn't get any.
I'll let him look over
I'll
my
change
shoulder.
it.
I did see it. It looks great.
Wow. What is that? I didn't know that.
So just wanted to take a moment to recognize him for doing that, and we appreciate that, Jake. Thank you very much. And it's a great fit for the dog park, so thank you, sir.
Yeah, nice job.
And congratulations on the
Any questions you have for him? Anything you want to say, add?
How many people helped put the pergola together, Jake?
There was like 4 or 5 adults that helped put it together. We had Matt Siders and a couple people from Gordon Lumber helped me figure out the pricing and all the materials and stuff that we would need. And then we had about 4 or 5 students and 2 adult volunteers from Troop 40.
Awesome.
And were the students other Boy Scouts?
Yeah, the students for the Boy Scouts.
Congrats on the Eagle Scout.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Jeff.
Fantastic. Okay, anybody else? All right.
Thank you.
Johnny.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? All right, Matt, you're back up.
Thank you again. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you that we have selected someone for the recreation coordinator position. We had a really high quality pool of candidates for this position. Out of the 24 candidates, we decided to interview 9. And of the 9, we came down to about a final 2 and made a decision that we're going to hire Sarah Boots, local Mount Vernon resident here. She was a previous Park and Rec director in Lisbon for 4 years, has summer camp and retreat experience. Her latest position was an accountant, so will help financially some of the organization that will need to take place. But we're extremely thrilled to have Sarah and her skills to help start the rec center. I thought she was the best qualified. The group that was interviewing thought she was the best qualified to hit the ground running for the facility. So Sarah will be our new hire, starting July 1.
Wonderful. All right, anybody have any questions? Anything else on that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Nice job.
all right, next item is the consent agenda, approval of council minutes from our May 6th council meeting, approval of cigarette permits, Casey General Store, approval of liquor license for Biggs, and appoint Elise Rottenberg as our Mount Vernon Community Band Director.
I would move to approve the consent agenda and just want to make a note that I really appreciated the letter that Elise Road, and I'm thrilled that she's excited about the role, because big shoes to fill, and very important here, and I think she'll be wonderful at it.
And on that, I would second with thanks to Don Stein for his,
Yes.
Lord knows how
Yeah.
many years of direction.
One of those things that's easily taken advantage of, you just don't realize it, that many years, and,
Mhm.
yep.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't even know if that's the official title, because Don's been in it.
Right,
Yeah.
since he
it's always
created
been
it.
done, you know, yeah.
But it sounded good.
Yep,
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
Since the music.
Bigger name tag.
and then are we gonna have further conversations if there's more money needed for that, or?
We'll be able to handle any request, because it's too late
Right.
to put anything formal together, so I think we'll be able to handle any requests coming forward. Don and Elise will meet to talk about music. He's gotten a lot of the music before in the past, so I just spoke with him last Thursday and let him know that Elise was going to be on the agenda, so you'll likely see something.
If needed.
We currently give them $1,000, so even if we doubled it, it wouldn't be something that we'd have to formally bring back to you, but, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I saw her today, she's excited about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yep.
And this is effective pretty immediately, right? I mean, I guess selfishly.
Tuesday in June.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Typical Tuesday.
Right, yeah.
We
so-
typically at this point in time have practiced 3 times. By this
That would,
Yeah.
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 Good. Anybody else? Otherwise, entertain a motion?
I think we did a motion.
Did we do one?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, public hearing on the authorization of a loan and disbursement agreement and the issuance of notes, to evidence the obligation of the city thereunder. I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody that'd like to address the council on this item? Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Proceed on to G1, Resolution 520, 2019A, instituting proceedings to take additional action for the authorization of a loan and disbursement agreement and the issuance of not to exceed 1.8 million sewer revenue capital loan notes. Chris?
I really don't have anything. This is the last piece to our SRF funding for the UV disinfection. We've already held the pre-construction meeting, so we just need to finalize this paperwork and start submitting receipts then to the state and start getting payments.
Anybody have any questions? Otherwise,
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 5-20-2019A, instituting proceedings to take additional action for the authorization of a loan disbursement agreement and issuance of not to exceed 1.8 million sewer revenue capital loan notes.
Second.
any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue?
Weisler,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Ronabush,
Yes.
West, yes, Herman.
Yes.
All right, and then as Chris mentioned earlier, we'll need a motion to table ordinance 415, 2019A.
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And again, we'll need a motion to table ordinance 56, 2019A.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, resolution 5-20-2019B, approving a 28E agreement with Lynn Fire District 1 for fire and emergency services. Chris?
I feel like we've been working on this for 2.5 years now, but we finally come to an agreement. Essentially, Lynn County Fire District 1 will start giving the city 70% of their tax asking. And we've agreed that should we ever terminate the agreement in the next 20 years, that their half of the assets were $533,017.50. So those two numbers have been what we've been looking at negotiating. So the best part about this is we currently cut 2 checks. When Fire District cuts a check, we cut a check for half of a lot of the expenses. That's a real pain for the fire department. The other issue is their tax growth is not keeping up with our tax growth, and then of course the expenses that are being incurred at the fire department. So realistically, we were going to end up here at some point in the future. We just thought we'd be proactive and have the conversation when there wasn't any pressure necessarily. But I do feel like we've gotten to a point where everybody's happy. The attorney has reviewed this. It is subject to the Linn County Attorney's Office finally signing off as well. There was one language change that was made that they have to approve. But once we approve, then the Linn County group can vote on this. The last bit of that we'll have to work on is the city of Bertram. Currently contracts through Linn County, and they will contract directly with City of Mount Vernon moving forward. Otherwise, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Who represented Lynn Fire District Number 1?
So the Board of Trustees of each of, there's a representative from the Board of Trustees for each one of the districts that are in the 3 townships. So one of the township trustees in each of those is made up of that board. I currently sit on it along with the fire chief, a representative from the Board of Trustees of at least 3 of the areas. It's kind of it's not a quasi-judicial board, it's just a board that gets together and then we approve expenses and budgets. So moving forward, that board will stay intact, more as an advisory position than anything. We want to make sure that we keep the line of communication between the townships open. Obviously, we don't want to spend $533,000 if we don't need to. They don't want to create a new fire department if they don't have to. So it's pretty imperative that we keep those lines open. And so Russ, and I'm gonna get his last name. Yeah, has been kind of the main negotiator, I guess you would say, for the fire district, and of course they have representation as well at Mount Vernon. Craig, so.
The only concern I had with it was the $533,000, and I still haven't decided whether this is worth fighting about. But I get if in a year they want to pull out, but in 19 years, the equipment that we're paying half on has depreciated 19 years worth.
Yeah, so that was kind of the point of contention going back and forth. I don't disagree with you. I also see their side as well. When they decided to move forward with this agreement, they have invested $533,000 into the equipment. Should they be forced to leave, to no fault of their own, I mean, we could back out of this agreement as well. Their big fear was obviously that they would be starting from scratch. And so the expectation is we would never have to exercise that. $533,000 wouldn't be enough to start a new fire department again, between a building and then even one piece of equipment would be $500,000 just to get the pumper. So I feel comfortable. There was a lot of back and forth discussion. That's why it's taken 2 years.
And that was my, if this
Same
had been
argument that
we started talking about it 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and this was where we're at, it's all right, we gotta go back, but, yeah.
Same argument that I made. Obviously, I would have loved to see a sliding scale depreciation, but we weren't going to get there.
Yeah, okay. Well, as long as it was on the table and we talked about it, I'm not gonna second guess the people that went to it, so.
Yeah, it was at nauseam.
Okay.
Anybody else?
How's the CPA feeling with that?
Well, so my head is kind of going, thinking, in 20 years, they're going to be acquiring new things as well. It isn't like Everything will
just,
just appreciate it and then we'll start today and then stop wanting things, so.
We own everything moving forward.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this number is the value of the equipment that we currently have that they did put
Right.
money into. So they did cover 50% of these costs.
Mhm.
If you'll notice, the one piece of equipment that the latest purchase, they don't get any credit for,
Mhm.
because we purchased that solely out of our funds. Yeah, like I said,
I mean, it's not an accounting way to do things, but
no.
Yeah.
if I agree with Scott, you know, if you all talked about it, then it's the best thing that could happen out of the room.
2 years worth, yeah.
Give me a rough idea of where Lynn County Fire District 1 runs. I tried to find a map online and I couldn't come up with anything. Or,
There's a small part that Lisbon covers, but kind of the Bertram area
okay.
in and around there, south and north. I couldn't tell you exact
Okay.
lines, but,
All right.
Is it as far as Ely?
huh?
Is it as far as Ely?
No, because it follows the township, so there's
Okay.
3 townships that are involved.
Okay.
So what are the three, do you remember Bertram's one of them?
I do not.
Franklin.
Franklin and
Mhm. I assume, and I read through it, but my eyes glazed over at a certain point, but I assume there's some function to monitor the 70% of the total tax receipts.
there is. They're just not, I mean,
Yeah.
Lynn County is aggressive when it comes to subdivisions in the county. So their tax base is obviously not going to grow at the same percentage ours is, and that's kind of what we're running into
Right.
today.
In that case, I would move approval of Resolution 5-20-2019B, the 2080 agreement between Lynn County Rural Fire District and the City of Mount
Second.
Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue?
Rose,
Yes.
Weisler,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Rutherford.
Well, that's good work done to get that off the checklist. All right, next item, resolution 5-20-2019C, approving budget amendment 1 for fiscal year 2018-2019. Chris, I know this is pretty much business as usual, but anything to add?
No, I mean, obviously we had the bonds come in, we have, we received our check for the donations. So there's a lot of revenues that came in that we weren't sure were going to come in this fiscal year that we had to adjust for, and of course, expenses as well. So it's the budget process in general. We start with our best guess at the beginning of the year, and then we have this process that allows us to go back and adjust numbers to make sure that we're finishing the fiscal year with a kind of a true and accurate portrait of our budget. So included is the state form, and it's just the adjustments back and forth. If you have any questions, Sue works on the numbers for us. So it's been through 3 sets of eyes already.
So are we amending the 1.8, that middle column, bottom row? $1.88, $4 million. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
That's the net.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 5-20-2019C, budget amendment number 1 for current fiscal year.
I'll second.
Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue?
Herman,
Yes.
Rutherford,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
All right, next item, resolution 5-20-2019D, approving ordering construction of certain public improvements, approving preliminary plans and fixing a date for hearing thereon, and taking bids therefore for improvements known as the security equipment package for the Lester Bush Family Community Wellness Center project. Chris?
So, this is one of the packages that we've been holding on to. This is basically door hardware, cameras, the operating systems for the building itself. I had set aside $100,000 out of the budget for this project. The engineer's estimate right now is $99,500. The good news is that they're fairly fixed costs though. I mean, they have a fairly good idea of what the camera is going to be, what the door hardware is going to be. We know that we're going to move forward with a program called RecDesk. It talks to a program called S2, which is the security aspect. So RecDesk will actually write programming to match this, so they only have to issue one card.
Nice.
Glad they're doing it, not me, but yeah, I think all in all, been very impressed with Design Engineers, who's the one that's put the bid package together, so I feel fairly confident that we should come fairly close to that number.
Can't get much closer than that.
I move to approve Resolution 5-20-2019, D, approving ordering and construction of certain public improvements to Lesser Birch Family Community Wellness Center project.
I'll second.
Any comments? Some comments? Roll call, please, Steve.
Rodebush,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Weisler,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to motions for approval. Consideration of claims list is the first item.
I move approval of the claims list as presented in this folks have.
I have a clarification. It says Pierce Industrial Electric, isn't it Price Industrial Electric for the traffic signal installation?
On the fourth item.
Yeah, it is price.
Second motion, first of all.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I jumped the gun on the motion.
Yeah, sorry. No, that was my only clarification.
Anybody else?
Fine with it, just wanted to clarify.
No, that's good. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion, consideration of change order number 15. Chris?
This is the first weather-related change order that we received. Change order is in the amount of $15,997.51. This amounts to all of the dirt stored on the north half of the ravine closest to the drive at the high school. Good news is, all of that dirt will now be used because of the grant application we received, or the grant dollars that we received from Walmart to build the trail network. That dirt will now go to form the base of that entire project. In order to keep the schedule moving forward, Garland did stockpile that, remove that dirt, put clean fill in. We could probably, going back to our previous discussion, we could probably argue semantics on it, but for $15,000, nobody's going to end up winning in this. And since we already have a reuse for it, I'm okay with this change order. Nice part about this one is we can charge this to the community center, and we can charge this to the bike trail project. So we have multiple funding sources if they need to transfer funds in the future. So
If this was gonna be used for backfill that needs to be dry, why in the heck didn't they cover it up?
the nice part about, they did have it covered, first of all, so everything was blanketed. If you
The
look,
piles were, I don't remember.
no. This came after digging foundations, so,
Right, so you pile it up, and then you cover it.
they
So it
piled
doesn't
it
get
up
saturated.
after the fact, so.
After it was saturated?
Yes, so they had the building pad covered with blankets. This is the material that came out of that building pad for all the interior foundations
Correct.
that didn't pass bronze inspection. So they would have to take that out, spread it out, dry it, in order to use it as
Bill?
Well,
backfill for the project. They knew it wasn't going to work. They could save 2 weeks bringing in clean rock. They did it. So that stockpile was after the fact. They just moved it, and the only thing that I gave them permission to do was move it to that area on the north side of the property,
Right.
because I knew we might have a use for it in the future.
Well, I guess this is semantics, but when you do something over a winter, you're gonna get snow, you're gonna get saturated like that. So the original bid, since this was done, should have had called out for rock in the first place. I mean, it's gonna snow in Iowa, you're gonna have water saturating that. It should have been called out for rock in the first place, rather than backfill with dirt, so. A lot of, like I said, I've dealt with these architects, and they just never get it right. They think they can just use a little pin and, oh, it looks like it's gonna work, and they don't figure it out in their head, and it ends up 15 grand. I mean, like I said, it builds up after 15,000, 2,000, 6,000. It's just, what are you paying for? That's what I'd like to know. So, 15 grand doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, 15 grand is a lot. So anyway, that's something you just make them realize that, wintertime saturation, put fill in there from now on, that's rock rather than dirt. And they should make a note of that and not have that problem again, so. I mean, they've done enough times, I'm sure it's happened over and over and over again, and people just don't learn, because they try to keep the cost down, so people push it through. Anyway,
Anybody else?
that's my say.
No, that's all right. Anybody else, otherwise, Tom?
In hindsight, should we have had more borings done by Shinola Fozzie? Or they just determined more borings would have found it earlier?
Well, this is surface though, isn't it?
But-
This wouldn't have corrected this issue. So there's, and this is what I go through daily with this project. So the architect is going to argue in this case that there were windows in which these could have been dug, poured, and backfilled, which there were, because all the way through July, there were windows there. You can argue the schedule. Carling's going to come back and say that there were 28 days, essentially, that were below freezing, and even though they put blankets on top of the pad itself, it still didn't keep this winter that we dealt with at bay. This one, to me, is a wash in that this change order ended up being okay only because we were going to have to purchase that dirt one way or the other for the trail project, because every portion of the trail project needs a base to be constructed with it. It's all flat and kind of in a ravine, so. I can't, the change orders are going to be there. That's why they have the contingency the way that they do. In our case, we have $385,000. I don't expect to spend it all. But
Anybody else? You just lucked out with the trail, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
For that reason, I'll move to approve change order number 15.
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of change order number 17. Chris?
this is the formal approval of the $1,079.40. It's already been approved for them on site. This is a retaining wall on the north side. If you look, or south side, sorry. If you look at the southeast corner of the building, there's a foundation that has to come off of it for the outdoor seating area, because there are two precast panels that will make up basically the south side of the retaining wall. It sits on a foundation, there's groundwater coming in, they pump it out, they just can't pump fast enough. Tom, to answer your question, could they have done more soil borings in this instance? Yes, but for the cost of the change order versus doing the necessary number of soil borings to cover the entire site, it's actually much
Fix it.
cheaper than
Much
paying
cheaper.
$1,000 for the rock. It is a little bit of a gamble. But, yeah, I mean, unless you do a number of soil borings, there's still going to be the potential for the change orders.
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 17 for the Weston Burris Family Community Wellness Center.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of donor signage quote. Chris?
You have to make a motion. to
Oh, I'm
table
sorry,
for
yeah,
it.
motion.
For, this is change order 18?
Yep.
Okay. Make a motion to table change order number 18 for the Weston Burris Family Wellness Center.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Deb. Next item, discussion and consideration of donor signage quote.
So the donor signage is $19,382.75. I've provided copies of what the donor signage will look like when you walk in to the area. One of my only requirements for this was that this had to be easily changeable. So should we have to take a section off, and if it's damaged or destroyed, my biggest pet peeve is when I go into other facilities and I see the donor wall and they're missing all of these things, and it's because they're etched in stone or they're difficult to make changes to, and then they sit empty. This donor wall is set though. This is all of the donations that came into the facility prior to us moving forward. So we'll have to recognize if individuals bequeath or something like that in the future, we'll have to figure out a different way to add recognition for them. But in the meantime, like I said, this was part of the budget as well as the signage on the exterior of the building, so.
What was the original budget number?
The original budget number that they had in there was just under 10,000.
So this is almost double that amount.
I assume this is Lester in the mock-up?
Correct.
Do you share this with the major donors, or do you not share the design with the major donors?
They'll have, the major donors will have communication as far as what they want printed on their individual sign. The design itself was not shared with the major donors.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to get into that, I mean.
Yeah,
what
it
did we-
it gets
we drop?
difficult.
Too many opinions.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens to two things? There have been donors that have come forward that were not part of our initial funding, so new names that weren't in this pool. And then there are people who have committed money but not remitted money.
As long as they were committed, and I think everybody had, initially we had discussed a 3-year period in order to make their commitment. So as long as they have committed their funds, the good news is we're not sitting at 95% uncommitted or anything like that. So Rory will finalize, before this gets constructed, Rory will finalize the names, and then we'll make sure that how it's listed with all of the major donors, for the most part, have been, but we'll just verify this before, like I said, it goes to construction. But everybody that has been listed so far would be listed on this.
Is there a drop dead date for no more donations will be accepted, that'll make this plaque, and then in the future we'll go towards supposedly the foundation?
I would say within the next month, before
So
they
that's pretty
start
soon,
actually
okay.
So
constructing.
funding received against commitments would still go into this,
Correct,
but unknown
New.
names would go to the other.
correct.
I think this is one of those items that, off Eric's point in terms of being more than what was originally budgeted. This is a pretty crucial piece for the building and to recognize those individuals. How did we locate this vendor, Chris? Was there anybody locally that could do the same work?
No, this is a vendor that, the interior design and sign individual for OPN have recommended. There was 2 others that were also Cedar Rapids, had less luck with them. And for me, I asked that it be one of their best vendors, simply because we have a lot of people to recognize,
Yeah.
and this is where, for the most part, everybody's going to be listed on that wall, so I didn't want to skimp on this item.
In my last career, I worked with ASI for a decade, and I could say they're quality end, but they are not inexpensive.
Sure.
You know, so,
You get what you pay for, is that
yeah,
right?
it's not the cheapest one out there, that's for sure.
We'll likely see more on the exterior signage, just basically letters that would go on the building itself, so.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I would move approval of the door sign quote in the amount of $19,382.75 for the West Burris Community Family Wellness Center.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of a generator at the Lester Burris Family Community Wellness Center. Chris?
So this is one of the items that I think staff has kind of gone back and forth with, and we more or less want to get council's opinion. So the building itself is not designed as a storm shelter, so it doesn't meet the design guidelines set forth by the state as far as being a storm shelter. Now, I would say if you were in the locker rooms of this facility, you'd be fairly safe. But
You mean giant glass walls doesn't qualify for storm shelter?
probably in high winds will do okay. But I would go to the locker rooms myself. We did reach out and look at that grant program when we first looked at the building, but they weren't going to allow us to get credit for the high school and elementary school because they'd have to leave one considered safe structure to go to another. So, with that being said, one item that has kind of fixed us, I guess, is the generator. So we can look at placing a generator there, but it's going to be $150,000, and it will not run the entire building. It will give you lights, it will give you computers, it will likely give you heating, because that's gas. It will not give you air conditioning. The plan in discussion was for this not to necessarily be a shelter, but if it had to be used as one, obviously Red Cross could set up there if need be. But there's 2 options in front of us. One, we can wire the building to take a generator and manually switch over. We can run a generator that would more or less come in on a trailer and plug in. That is between $65,000 and $75,000. We do not have to have a generator. It's not an essential service. If we lose power, then they could potentially close while the power was down. So just kind of I didn't feel like this was a discussion that just staff should be having. It should be an option for the entire council.
One of the first questions that came to my mind, do a lot of the other sites that you visited have generators?
No. At least not that I saw when we were on site. There were 2 facilities, I believe, that were multi-unit buildings, meaning, one was used by 5, it was actually owned by 5 different groups, so there were 5 different functions there. And another was actually connected to the school, so I don't think that technically counts.
Right.
As having their own generator, it was tied in with the school district, so.
So, since this wouldn't be necessarily a storm shelter, like a tornadoes come in, hunker down kind of shelter, this would be more an emergency response or long-term outage in town, here's a safe place people can go kind of place. In that scenario, currently, without this online, what are the options in town? We've got here often is open.
Here,
Would the schools, are the
The
schools a part of that
schools-
response?
it would potentially be another outlet. So the one, I guess the one disaster where something like this would first to come into play is A, tornado, and B, an ice storm. Those are the two where we could see long-term elongated power outages in case of the ice storm. You know, they have lasted 2 to 3 days. Maybe people have been without power for 2 or 3 days. So we don't have any equipment there. I will say that it's not like we ordered cots to be there, but
Right, but a place that's warm and.
the challenge that I have, the thing that kind of keeps me up at night when we talk about this is now's the time to do it. The $65,000 to $75,000 number as far as the wiring is concerned goes up drastically.
Infinitely, yeah.
Because they didn't pull the wire through the conduit that they have, so,
I mean, if it's shocked it costs that much, probably we don't have a background, or
Yeah.
obviously wouldn't. In terms of, that just seems a lot, because ideally, if you run the wiring and then maybe buy a generator later, I could see that making sense, but that's still a lot of money. That's not.
Well, and he's
anywhere in the
saying,
budget.
even in that circumstance, it wouldn't be able to run the whole facility.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know if it's worth the investment, with too many unknowns left to be unknown.
Have Doug and Nate weighed in on?
Doug and I have discussed this.
Okay.
Nate and I have not, but, like I said, we do have a generator here at City Hall. It does basically operate the entire facility because it's a much smaller facility. That's the problem that we would have at this facility is at 34,000 square feet. You have 4 air handling units on the roof now. To put in a generator that could run this facility would not even be in this ballpark, so.
Is there ever, in the process of this, and you were on the committee, was there ever discussion about it being a shelter?
Yes, in the very beginning, yeah. And part of our visioning had that idea with the grant opportunities, but as soon as we learn more, it's very similar to what discussion we had at the school district, Tom, when the high school was built. You know, it costs an awful lot of money to have that, those qualifications met.
Very
And
specific.
so, yep, and so we said, no, we're not gonna do that.
I think we should follow those recommendations.
Yes, my concern was the trailer thing. I mean, while it
Yeah.
sounds sort of intuitive and, yeah, wire for it, but if you have an ice storm, how are you gonna get a generator here on a trailer?
Well, so that's kind of the problem too, if we have a tornado
Yeah.
coming through. So hospitals will get priority for any generator likely that's in the area. We can run a generator and it does come in on a trailer, so depends on how widespread the disaster would be. I mean, if the ice storm is all of eastern Iowa, then we would be hard pressed to get a generator here in the 2 days. Law enforcement would be number one, we already got a generator here. So we could, like I said, we still have this facility here, we can still house people and heat people in the winter. If we see, you know, a tornado that would probably be would necessitate 34,000 square feet. I'm not sure that building would be there. And that tornado would likely be quite large. So, yeah, it's, like I said, it's something that we kind of wrestled back and forth with. It's not necessarily staff's call by any means, but I don't want to seem callous by looking at this expense and saying it's no, but we do have other options here.
Does
in town.
anybody know, back in 2007, we had the ice storm, and that was pretty good when there was snap poles all over. Does anybody remember how many people came here during that time? Because there were people out in the outer areas for quite some time.
It wasn't an overflow, I don't recall it being an overflow, but I know there were cots throughout the whole room, but
Right.
I don't remember them spilling out into the hallways or anything like that.
See, just based on it, and that was a bad one. And they got the city on within, I don't know, what was it, 24 hours, 36 hours
I
or
know it was
something
a
like
couple
It
days.
was a couple of days, 2 or 3 days.
So, I mean, based on that, if this facility handled that, I don't see that expense being justified, I really don't.
Yeah, I don't either.
And that's fine, like I said, I didn't want, it was just one of those items that should be discussed here.
Do the schools have generators?
No, they do not.
Are they wired for the rental
I would doubt it.
scenario?
No.
Or no?
I don't remember bringing the port for these plug-in for a generator.
The expenses, like you see, 65.
Right, no, I'm just thinking through if we, is there some other facility where we can say, well, we already have this one?
The fire department.
The fire department, okay, so theoretically the firehouse, if pressed into service. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be, I mean, we would be in a tight squeeze, but again, it would probably be something that's going on widespread.
Are there-
My biggest concern would be those that are on oxygen or
Of course.
need electricity
Mhm.
immediately, they would get priority. So we have scenarios already established for this,
Right.
but
Are there accommodations at Cornell anywhere?
Cornell has, they do have a generator in one of their buildings, I think. But I could tell you,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about small life center, isn't
Yeah,
it?
somewhere by the tennis court or small life center, yeah. They've got one, I know that.
but I would think they would be in the same boat. Like I said, I can't imagine they put a generator in large enough that would be able to run everything. And that's, I mean, that was really kind of what it boiled down to me when I spoke to design engineers was we still wouldn't necessarily guarantee that this would be a cooling center, for instance. Heating, they felt pretty confident that a generator would be able to last a couple days for that, but I'm not sure that this expense would serve the purpose that we were trying to get to.
Agreed.
Well, as long as it wasn't positioned as a shelter to the people who donated it, I think that.
Sounds like you have what you need, Chris?
Yes.
No motion or anything needed on this item. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to the reports. I see Chief Shannon with us tonight, but Mount Vernon Police Report. Anybody have any questions on that item?
I'd just like to bring up 4 more accidents.
I-
I'd like to see, it's been what, 6 years now? 5 or 6 years now. I'd like to see the 5 years prior and the 5 years after, because this was sold as being safer, not having the backups, and we actually had backups on 10th Street still into the roundabout. It happens several times, and nothing that this thing was supposed to do has really come to fruition. And I think the people should see, based on prior and now with it, what they got for their money. Because this was just a bad use of taxpayers' money, and just terrible. $2.3 million, and I just don't see any good coming out of it. Especially the poor people who keep getting sideswiped in the roundabouts. Yeah, people aren't getting killed, but, well, there was never, and actually that's another thing about it, nobody ever did get killed in the 4-way stop. There were injuries, pretty good ones, but this is a constant thing, 4.
I'll have Doug look again. I do believe those numbers were provided a history before and a history after when we did the initial report with MSA.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and pull that report, but they're just working with DOT right now, who's focused obviously on the bypass to get the cost estimates for the improvements. The first being the visualization.
Can't we just use some of that dirt that we can't use right now and put it right in the middle of the
Yeah.
Put
And then we can cover it.
30 feet high right
Well,
now?
but no, you can't do that because it would cause an accident too. It's gotta be able to be drove over, remember?
I still think, and I was almost one of those victims of being sideswiped 2 days ago, so worth to understand. But I think transitioning the medians to go to a one-way in, one-way around, because for the most part, the side swipes are because of, I believe, the two lanes on half of the roundabout.
Yeah.
And the fact that people are not expecting to look over and see somebody utilizing the second lane. So that can't be done, or the DOT will not give us permission to do that until after the bypass is pulled in.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on the police report? That's usually the first thing I do too, though. Back with what Eric shared, I usually count, all right, how many highway 1 and 30 are repaired, right? Which is unfortunate, because again, yeah, I mean, that's not what it was designed to be. But. Next item, Auburn Public Works Report. Mike's got a lot of good news to share.
Excellent news. Mayor, council, how are we doing? Good. Part of the report at the end was included some just rough numbers of like a dozer rental. And as you know, we purchased the new public works ground, November, December, somewhere in there. And part of us developing that is the hope that we can kind of do some of this work in-house with the dozer rental. So actually today, these D&K came out with the new improved plans. We've been working with them now since November on getting some kind of site development plan and just kind of what staff and how we feel the city will grow and what we think the site should look like in 20 years, assuming the city continues to grow as we are. And just our current needs, actually, some of this with our current needs, especially with the compost area. So we all know that it's on a dirt road currently. So purchasing or renting this dozer would allow us to upgrade the road, get it rocked for now so we can get entrance in there temporarily so we can start hauling the leaves once we take over this program and dumping leaves there. Not to mention hopefully cleaning up the ambulance building site, hauling some of that dirt, using it. The road's going to come up. There'll be ditches. Everything's kind of been accounted for. If you look through here, the 10-foot trail that's proposed by Lynn County is actually already included on this. So that site look would be part of this. And the dozer is supposed to be pretty high tech, as well as with GPS and everything. We would be able to just go out there and put anyone in the seat technically, and the dozer does most of the work for you. Now, I think you have to have a little bit of knowledge in how to run the dozer, but we have two crew members that have quite a bit of background with heavy construction and stuff like that. So we feel comfortable trying it out on our site, because we figure if we screw this up, it's our site. If it goes well, one of the thoughts was, there's a couple soccer fields that we need to grade, and I included in there some of the rough numbers that we're seeing just to have someone come in and do that. So depending on how long it takes us, maybe it would be an option, to continue the rental and knock out that site and get some soccer fields built on Elliott Park site. So that's kind of our proposal of hoping that we can do this in-house and save some cost. So, a lot of topsoil out there.
From the edge of our property to, what is it, Irish Lane or what?
Yes.
What's that distance?
Oh, it's another, don't quote me on this, Eric, but
Like
it's,
half a mile or three-quarters of a mile?
it's another, it's 1.5 of our sites. So, and I think our site's about 1,000 feet, so I think it's 1,500 feet, or,
Oh,
or,
It's just to the S curve.
that's just the S curve, right?
So there's another 1,000 feet to the S curve.
So it's probably about,
Probably close to three-quarters.
Three-quarters
The
of a
shoe
mile.
tree is my marker.
yeah,
So where are we at
That's at
from
the
that?
S
About
curve.
1,000 feet short of.
1,000 feet of the shoe tree,
Okay.
and then another one of these sites.
Have you guys discussed with Lynn County?
We've reached out to them, and originally, because they kind of do a share program where they will come in and basically put rock on the road for you,
Right.
but they recommended, well, you need to engineer this, because if you just come in and rock the road as is, you will still have these low spots, and there's no culvert currently, so we're gonna add a couple culverts, and that's where our detention basins will come in. The site will collect the water like it should, and this won't be a mud road, is what it currently is. So, talking with them, they said, once you get beyond that, I think they would be open to a conversation, but their fear is, once you get around that S curve, how much drainage is there.
Mhm.
So upgrading that, I would think if the city would go to them and say, hey, we want to help with this effort, I think they would, probably be open to it, especially with this trail thing coming in. So,
Yeah, because that'd be a good route exit out.
yeah, and so part of our future, and with talking with Chris and seeing this property, just thinking getting to Irish Lane gets us to New 30, the interchange there, because they'll have access to go west, I believe, on New 30. And then that also gets us to the access road, so it kind of gets us to the other side of town a lot quicker if that ever, we ever did upgrade that. To, at minimum, a gravel road for Lynn County currently, if they don't want, because it's still Lynn County's, it's in their district.
Their responsibility.
The shoe tree would be the actual city limit right now.
I didn't envision 3 driveways. Are they necessary?
Yes, so in the future, the furthest west driveway, what we envision there is you being able to come out as any resident, and we don't currently take yard waste. Well, if you have leaves, if you have yard waste, bring them to us, we'll throw it in the compost pit. And so those storage stalls, they are where you would dump your stuff. Monitoring that is something we're gonna have to work on, because I've heard horror stories from Solon of the stuff that you collect. But, maybe we have to have acceptable drop-off times when we have someone on site, as we work through that.
The way you have to have cameras, I'm guessing.
Yeah, or cameras, so, because obviously everyone likes, like anyone, we like to do our yard work on Saturdays, so us to man something for a free drop-off probably isn't, the best. So, but that driveway was envisioned for that, Tom, so we can kind of block off the rest of our site with some kind of, cable fence of some sort, so they're not kind of on the site messing around when no one's there. And then the other 2 driveways would be advantageous for having a semi, when we get the way to be able to turn around, and us having in and out access.
Obviously, it's not on the agenda now, Chris, or no.
No, I
bulldozer.
just, what I wanted to do tonight, because we have reports, is to let Nick get this in front of you, because in 2 weeks, I'm gonna be back in front of you, and I didn't want to just come to a meeting and tell you this is what we're planning on doing.
Anything else from your report?
Well, then, so this week, so this is kind of late for the report. We've actually been trying to work on this for 2.5 weeks, but had trouble getting response out of people getting here to take a look at what we thought we were seeing. So the pool heater, the boiler unit on the deep end, has extensive corrosion. And we believe this is, so one of our new staff members came from a different community, they had a pool, they were in charge of maintenance, we said, hey, your chemicals should be in a separate building. Well, no one's ever really said that to us. And the pool heater, one of the pool boilers sits, I don't know, within 5 feet of the acid barrels and chlorine. So all these chemicals pretty much causing all this corrosion on the boiler unit has brought us to ask the people that installed it to come back and show us how we should clean out what we thought was just the heat exchanger, which basically is the boiling unit itself. Show us how to clean it out, so then in the future, we'll just take care of that maintenance plan, you know, as part of our maintenance plan. Well, they came in, found extra wires that were burnt, so as that heat exchanger gets full, it calls for more heat to try to bring the water. It's thinking that the water isn't as warm as it actually is, but because it can't, the exchange rate isn't what it should be with all the corrosion in there. So that has led to the thing burning a lot hotter. It's pretty much melted itself from the inside. So there's two numbers here. One is to replace the parts that they think it needs without the heat exchanger. They think the heat exchanger can be reused. The heat exchanger actually is another $3,000 because that's where our guys started. They're like, hey, we should probably just replace this. And then they saw that number and they said, we should probably call someone that knows exactly what's going on because we're not boiler experts by any means. So,
I think, long story short, we've always stored our chemicals. If you go over to the facility, we don't have a separate room to store chemicals. They've always been stored in the same place. Of course, we've never had a heater before. And throughout the project, whether or not Port Center to be, the contractors that were there noticed the fact that we housed our chemicals that close. We'll never be able to go back on a warranty or go back on the contractor. We store the materials there. So we're in the process of getting the materials out of there. The unfortunate part is
there another place to put that?
have to construct it.
we're gonna have to build at the site a bigger footprint. And we're currently researching moving the bulk tanks, and we wanna know their footprint before we would actually put on an addition to the pool house, to where we don't wanna build it too small, because we do know that the chlorine and acid need to have a dividing wall. So how big our footprint is gonna depend on how big the tanks are that they would provide for us. So, and we're talking about, in the end, trying to save some money chemically wise, because we wanna go to bulk chlorine and bulk acid, so you get a better rate as you buy it in bulk and bulk storage. And having it stored separately, it'll require a powered ventilation system, but kind of minimal when you are looking at these two quotes from Portson on how to, replace these units.
So what's the new warranty on the brand new
We'll
one?
see here.
It's just 1 year
Just 1
still.
year.
It is, so I do have the warranty. I asked Dave to find any paperwork on warranties for this boiler unit. It has a 5-year extended type warranty, but up to $1,000 back. So it's not, after the year, then it's kind of, and Portson's already saying, well, since your chemicals are so close, you're probably not gonna be able to. Well, I guess my question back to them would be, why didn't you tell us this? So, not trying to throw anyone under the bus.
I had Nick give this to you because the pool is scheduled to be open Memorial Day. This will be an emergency purchase. You can't take action on it tonight. We're just giving you the heads up. I'm also going to give you the heads up that I'm not going to gamble that the heat exchanger is good. That would be $10,750 if it's bad. We're only $2,000 apart buying new. So,
I guess, sorry to interrupt. Portson, they put in here 40 hours of labor. They're expecting it to take 2 guys roughly 8 to 10 hours to, it's such a new unit, it should be unplug, bring.
Everything's already there now.
Yeah, the maintenance tech thought it should take two guys roughly 8 to 10 hours one day. So, they said roughly $3,800 for that labor cost, so it might come down $1,500 maybe, if they can get it done sooner, so.
We'll have to push forward, obviously, before your next council meeting is the reason that I wanted to get it in front of you and let you know of what was going on. I did have a brief conversation with the mayor tonight about creating a task force. Now that we have the community center under construction, we do have the problem of the pool. I think everybody's got their opinions on how that should be handled, where it should be, so on and so forth, but I think that issue needed to be separate from the community center conversation, and now it's time to have a conversation, as I've told both Nick and Matt. They're doing a lot of Band-Aids at the current facility. If we plan to keep that current facility for the next 10 to 15 years, we need to put a little bit more extensive Band-Aids on our pool. So I kind of throw that out to you, see if the council would be interested. We can have that a discussion item at the next meeting as well, just to talk about tackling that problem moving forward, now that we've got a number of them kind of off the books, but we'll probably be.
I think it would be worthy starting that conversation sooner rather than later, because there's an awful lot of very strong feelings each way.
Very strong.
Yes.
Mhm.
I agree.
And the sooner we start, the sooner we can end it.
Yep.
I would be open to suggestion on number and people. I missed this part of the discussion on the community center, really. It was just, my experience with that was just a conversation, with Deb and Ed. So after that, it was kind of off the table. So if there are strong feelings on either side, I would like a mix of both to kind of see if they would be willing to sit on this and have the conversation.
I think it's important everybody understands that we can't have both. We can't have this pool and we can't have the pool.
And there's a shocking number of people who don't know that.
Yeah, we could afford both.
Yeah, I think the losses tell all. I mean, we currently take about a $20,000 to $25,000 loss in our bad years. In our good years, Matt's able to keep that gap less, but
And it used to be
times
closer to
4
40, so.
to likely operate an indoor facility, so.
Yeah,
20,
but
25 years.
indoor facilities, $4.5, $5 million, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah.
You could totally update
I think
the
the
pool outside for
conversation-
a lot less than that, so.
I think the conversation should be had. It'll give us an opportunity to have a conversation as well as why we left it out of the existing facility and
Yeah.
why that's a future phase, so. We knew this conversation was going to happen. It's a pride thing for me. I put a lot of pressure on Matt and Public Works both as far as the parks themselves. They're starting to make improvements. There's only so much that they can do internally before we actually start looking at kind of some major changes, so.
Yeah. So yeah, if anybody has any names or knows of anybody that might be interested. Anything else?
Sorry for all the great news.
It's Monday.
Thank you.
All right, next item, Vernon Parks and Rec report. Matthew, anything for the council?
Nothing new to report. Any questions? Soccer walk was great. Easter egg hunt was great.
Anybody have anything for Matthew? No? All right, thank you, Matthew. Next item is 5G regulations, which I know there's not much here, Chris.
So I handed those back out to you. Originally, when we adopted these in haste, we talked about bringing them back in front of the council. All I'm asking is that we defer this to planning and zoning, as it kind of falls in their backyard to let them do a review first. I just wanted to make sure that was okay with everybody. They're in place if we need them. We can tweak them based upon their recommendations if we choose to.
That just makes good sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody else have any questions or anything? All right. Next item, reports. I don't have much other than obviously we have graduations coming up, which we've already started parties. Ceremony was yesterday. Memorial Day weekend is, will be here before we know it, so a lot of good stuff going on. Anybody else have anything from council committee?
Just real briefly, before this meeting, I was at the Center for Rural Affairs, was having a watershed, or a water quality meeting over at the local, I believe is what it's called. And it was just, it's the watershed, it's the DNR, there were a bunch of folks represented, good Mount Vernon representation, Representative Hogue from the State House was there, so. So it was just, it was looking like it was gonna be a good conversation. I had to get here, so they got about 5 minutes in and then I walked out. But they have a couple of meetings a year, but the watershed that we're a part of takes up about a third of the state. And it's a huge portion that flows into the Cedar River. So it was an interesting beginning to the meeting. I can't speak for how it ended, but so if there's interest in that, I can help you guys up with people who to talk to.
Anybody else have anything? Chris, administrative report?
Speaking of planning and zoning, we're tackling the issue of fees, becoming a fairly hot topic in the community.
There's a buzz.
The only other thing is obviously Main Street, having the grant, or having the program here for the 3 days is huge. And be looking as well, I received some communication from Kate Rose as it relates to Merck Powers and kind of a letter of recognition. I don't know if that's something that you want to formally do as a group, or just have the mayor.
I don't think we've ever done anything like that before, have we? Sue, do you remember? Which I'm all for it, but yeah. I know Tom mentioned it at our last meeting.
Yeah, so it was in the minutes, I noticed that it did make the minutes.
A letter on our letterhead.
Yeah,
We can put something together.
I'm all for it. I think
Yeah,
that's
that'd be great.
stuff like that we should do. Requires no effort, it goes a long way. It makes sense. Anything else, Chris?
No, I've had enough news today.
Anybody else? Anybody? All right, no further business, please stand adjourned. Yeah.